be sitting somewhere in England.
Somewhere in England. I'm in London. I'm just having my banana because you can't do comedy without potassium.
But we thought that you were going to peel yours before you came on.
Oh, I have got another one.
Oh, you've got another one there that you can peel for us. Okay, so we've both brought our bananas.
Yeah.
How to get serious laughs in serious talks. Welcome, everybody. And also welcome to those that are going to be watching the recording of this interview, which I'll be posting up on my YouTube channel as usual. And I'll be giving a copy of the talk to Jeremy to also post on his media. So welcome, everyone. Again, the topic, how to get serious laughs in serious talks. Interesting that the word serious appears twice in the title, yet we're hoping that today won't be too serious. Okay, so my guest today has 27 years experience as a news broadcaster on TV and radio, mainly with the BBC. Alongside that, he's always been an after-dinner speaker and compere, and eventually moving into speaking full-time to share his knowledge about communicating with humor. He's a firm believer that you don't have to be born funny to get laughs, and he swears by techniques that he's used in successful runs of his shows at the Edinburgh Festival and tours across the UK and beyond. So welcome, Jeremy Nicholas.
Hi, Paul. How you doing? Lovely to be on your program.
Absolutely. And I believe I'm going to be on your program on Wednesday evening.
Yeah, so I host the YouTube sensation, the After Dinner Show with Jeremy Nicholas, and it was just lucky that that was my name. So I was the ideal person chosen to present it. And it's just people coming on telling true stories live, and you're going to be one of them. So I hope you've got a true story.
I've got a very interesting true story that started 42 years ago, but kind of got together about 2 weeks ago. So I will... I'll leave you in suspense.
Okay.
If you want to go on to Facebook for a clue, you can, but the story is ready.
Started 42 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, but came to a head in the last 2 weeks.
Now, 42, interesting number because that's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, number 42. And it's also the highest number of points the Premier League football team has been relegated with. And I know that because it was my team.
That's West Ham United.
West Ham United, yeah. But that's how my brain works. When I hear something, I hear it shoots off in lots of different directions. So you say 42, instantly I'm thinking about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And the reason Douglas Adams, who's one of the funniest men ever, I think, funniest Brits ever, picked that is because Lewis Carroll, the Alice in Wonderland guy, he had 42 in lots of his stuff. And I don't know if you've ever seen a program, it's a British Asian program, so you might not, called the Kumars at number 42. That's
oh no, we don't get that stuff here.
Right, Sanjeev Bhaskar, the actor, he's a big fan of Hitchhiker. So number 42, honestly, it pops up in films and popular culture all over the place.
Okay, but you just spoke about West Ham now, and I remember you kindly, well, let me just go back. I first met you at a professional speaking association convention in Birmingham in 2008.
Right.
I don't know if you remember that. You were the MC, certainly for the morning, and I remember thinking how brilliant you were then. And I've seen you subsequently doing various different, you've done a talk at our convention in South Africa in 2010, and I've seen you on numerous other occasions. So we've got to know each other over time. But one of the things I discovered is that you're a big West Ham supporter, and you used to be the stadium announcer.
Yes, so I was stadium announcer for 16 seasons at West Ham, and that was a lot of fun. We did get relegated in that time. But I don't really remember you in 2008 because see, I was on the stage and you were just an audience member. But
yes, I was an ordinary person and you were a superstar. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, people are always saying to me, Jeremy, I met you at this event. I can't really remember who you are. But yes, I remember you in 2010 onwards, Paul.
Well, I'm so glad that when I called to ask you to be on my interview that you remembered who I was.
Yeah, no, it's lovely to. And I can do you a story about, would you like a story about West Ham?
Yes, before you go there, I just want to say that you kindly gave me your book about Mr. Moon Has Left the Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
And interestingly, in the past week, I've been looking for some relatives by the name of Moon, which just happened to coincide with this interview coming up. And it gave me such a beautiful line when I eventually located the Mr. Moon I was looking for. And I could simply say in my Facebook post, Mr. Moon has now left the stadium. And of course, you would have known what that meant.
Yeah, so what it basically meant was that there was some kind of a security alert at the stadium. So they would say, would Mr. Moon please contact the nearest steward? And that would mean that probably a smoke alarm had gone off in one of the toilets. And then when the alert was over, Mr. Moon has left the stadium and everyone would cheer, even though nobody knew who Mr. Moon was. And they just would pick a random surname, and Moon is very uncommon. It's a Cornish surname, so it's very uncommon in London, so they picked that. In the same way as in the theatre, they would have Mr. Sands. In Victorian time, Mr. Sands is in the building would mean that someone needs to bring a bucket of sand because there's a fire. And then when the London Underground, the tube network, opened, it became Inspector Sands to the ticket office, means there's some kind of alert.
And the question is, do you find yourself reluctant to risk using humor in your talks? There are one of three answers you can give: not at all, somewhat risky, or an absolute no-no. So I'm going to launch it, and I'm going to give you 20 seconds to do the poll, and then let's look and see what we get. So
I tried to vote and it wouldn't let me because it says I'm a panelist. I'm not allowed to vote. I was going to vote that it scared the willies out of me. But
so we would have at least have known that you were the one that said an absolute no. All right, so I think we can end it off there, because the other three have probably gone to have a cup of tea or something. So let's end the poll. And we found that 63% said not at all, 38% somewhat risky, and nobody said that it was an absolute no-no. So you're dealing here with advanced comedians, Jeremy. So the question is, can anyone be funny?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I've taught you over the years. When I met you, you were very, very dull. But we've had a few chats, and I think you're a little bit funnier now, I think. Would you say?
Yes, well, I could tell set piece jokes, but that was about it.
Yeah. No, I think it's like if someone comes to me with the talk and says, can you make this funny? I'll say, yes, I can definitely put some funny lines in. And then can they deliver it funny? Yes, again, because all they've got to do is learn how to speak funny. So it would be a bit like if you were speaking in Berlin and they said you've got to deliver it in German, and you said, I don't speak German, but you could learn German, or you could have it translated for you. And that's basically the same with humor. It just needs translating. Most people's talks, the reason that they always think that they're not funny, and it's usually that their talk is not funny because the words are in the wrong order, and so they don't obey the grammar of comedy in the same way as you need to translate it into German. I don't know why I keep saying German, because that's a very strange thing to have with humor, but you just need to know what order to say the bits in, to set the stuff up so that when the punchline comes, people will laugh. And trust me, anyone can do that. It's just a set of rules. So there was one German guy that came to me and said he wanted to be funny, but he was German. So I'm not funny. I'm German. I'm not funny. And I said, okay, well, that's nonsense. Who would think that a whole race can't be funny? That can't be right, can it? I know lots of Germans, and I know lots of them are very funny, but there is this thing saying, well, Germans don't have a sense of humor. Of course they do. Yeah. So I worked with him, and then he was one of the first European speakers to get onto the main stage at the National Speakers Association convention. It was in Washington, and he got a standing ovation. And the next day, people were saying, how did you do that? He said, I worked with Jeremy Nicholas, and he just gave me permission to be funny. And basically what we did with him is we made the funny bit, I'm German, so I'm not funny. And he would deliver a line, and if it got a laugh, great. If it didn't, he'd go, if I wasn't German, that would have been funny. And then that would be the second, either the second laugh or the alternative laugh.
So my famous line when I try and be funny and nobody laughs, and I just say, well, they found that funny in Bloemfontein, and that gets a laugh.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a really useful technique that you're kind of doing it without perhaps knowing why you're doing it, but it's you commentate on how badly it's gone. People think, oh, he's a decent bloke because he has a laugh at himself, and they laugh at that.
Yeah. So you'd recommend a bit of self-deprecating humor being part of your arsenal?
Yeah. This is one of my big rules, is if you're ever not going down very well, turn it on yourself, because a lot of humor can be a bit cruel. When you're picking on a group, or maybe someone earlier at the event, and in the bar it can come across as banter, but on the stage to an audience it can come across as a bit cruel, and you come across as a bit dominant, a bit bossy. So the best way to do it is just turn it on yourself. So whenever I'm speaking in South Africa, for example, I'm never making jokes about South Africans, I'm always making jokes about Brits.
Yeah.
Oh, in
Well,
London we do this.
South Africans love that.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
And if I make jokes about South African stuff that I think's crazy, South Africans are not going to like a Brit coming over. We've messed up South Africa enough over the last couple of 100 years without me coming over and making jokes about it. But if I poke fun at myself, I'll find a very willing audience for that.
Absolutely. Just promise me you won't try your South African accent on us.
Of course I won't. No, it just wouldn't work, would it?
Not with the South African audience, but we do have some people from the UK on with us. So let me ask you, what if your subject isn't suitable for humor?
Right. Then don't do it. If you think, no, it's not going to work, don't do it. But I would add to that I think most things you can use humor, and as long as you're sensitive about it and you're not cruel about anything and you're not racist, sexist, homophobic, I think you're going to be all right just putting a little bit of humor in. So for example, I coached someone the other day that was giving a eulogy at a funeral, and we're obviously having a lot of funerals at the moment with COVID, and people think at a funeral, they're having to do it now virtually, Zoom funerals. And people think, oh, I can't be funny. But if the person that's died was funny and they were a good friend of yours and everyone loved them, they would love to hear funny stories about that person. So why would you not do it?
Sure.
Everyone's sad when someone died, but crying and laughing are not that far apart, actually. So I always encourage, if I work with people on wedding speeches or funeral speeches, I say everyone in that room either loves you or loves the person you're talking about. So
yes,
just go for it. I mean, don't say anything bad about them, but don't feel like you've got to be deadly serious, because they'll be up in heaven looking down thinking, I wish you'd done a bit better, I'd have liked a few more laughs.
Yeah. I mean, I spent my whole life being funny. Now everyone's being serious at my funeral. That doesn't go down. So
one thing that might not work, if you're at an event, say a big conference, and the chief exec has announced there's going to be some redundancies, you don't then want to come along all laughy and jokey about that. But if there was something where you could kind of poke fun at the madness of the redundancies, so the people in the audience will think, yeah, that's crazy, then I would by all means go ahead. But you've just got to be very sensitive about not appearing to belittle a serious situation.
Absolutely. How do you adapt your style for virtual presenting, bearing in mind that in comedy, we get a lot of feedback instantly from our audience? Now, suddenly you're doing virtual stuff and it's a bit harder.
Yeah. So it's a disaster. There's no getting around it. It's trying to do comedy on a virtual thing is a disaster. So let's just accept that to start with. It's hard, Speaking is one of the hardest things. It's the thing that people are most scared of. Humorous speaking is even harder, because even if they're listening, if they're not doing anything with their faces, you've failed. And now suddenly you're going to get no feedback at all. It is tough. So there's a few things that I do. So I did a comedy night last week for a corporate client, and they had 100 people in the audience on Zoom. And I noticed with some of the previous comics, the worst thing on Zoom is when you start seeing the cameras being turned off. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. You're probably not, Paul, being such a good speaker, but some of the weaker ones, you'll see the cameras start, and what happens is they get relegated to the bottom. So if you've got, say, 100 speakers, so you get 49 maximum on a page. So let's say you've got 2 pages of speakers. You know that if the cameras start going off on page 1, that all of them on page 2 have been turned off. So that's just a nightmare. So I just try and make my act very, very different. And so I'll do a lot more images. Usually when I do a keynote presentation, for example, I only have a very few images that will come up behind me, and I don't use charts or words or anything. But on a virtual presentation, a lot more of that, because people need more stimulation, more stuff to see. So I would put funny pictures up. And particularly at the moment, I'm putting memes that I'll find on Facebook or Twitter about Brexit or about COVID or about anything that's in the news at the moment, funny stuff. And I'll just put maybe 3 of those at the start of any talk. and they'll be relevant to that week.
Yeah.
And I'll just say a few funny lines about them, like you'll see a TV program like in any of the late night chat shows that you see on American television. So like Trevor Noah, for example, you know, when he'll come on and he'll have some stuff, won't he? I was just trying to think of a South African example. Trevor Noah, brilliant. So I set up, rather than, you know, I see a lot of speakers standing up on virtual presentations like they would on stage. I think, forget that, sit down. And then I would go to newsreader position. So I'll slide across to about like that. And then I'll have images coming up here, and I won't do the share screen option. What I'll do is I'll put my images in as my virtual background. So I'll have a green screen, and then I've got one that looks like a newsroom, and I'll basically deliver a humorous news bulletin. And then because I'm off to one side, they'll come up almost like it would on the news. And all you've got to do is say you've got a virtual background with a green screen, and then just toggle left and right on your keys to make that background change.
Okay. But then again, there's another reason why people sometimes don't want to stand up, and that's because they might not have any trousers on. This seems to be a trend with some presenters.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that, because...
Well, let's see.
No.
Here we go.
No. Well, I have got trousers on, but they are jeans, whereas I would never, ever present in jeans, but no one would know. So yeah, I think you've just got to think. My whole thing was, don't make it look like I'm doing a presentation or a comedy routine. Make it look like I'm doing a news bulletin, and then you don't really expect to get any feedback from the audience if you're doing a news bulletin style thing. And then I've written some funny lines. It's not a serious news bulletin. I've written funny lines, but it doesn't matter if I don't get any feedback, because I know I'm not going to get any. And you've got to have nerves of steel, really, because you've got to be convinced, no, this stuff is good. And I know if I could hear them, they would be laughing. But maybe only if you're feeling brave, go to the gallery view, because you'll see quite a lot of people laughing, but people don't laugh that much if they're not in the room with you. They're much more likely to be smiling.
Yeah.
And if you have the gallery view on, you can easily, you know, blow your mind, because you'll see people just sitting like that. You think they're not enjoying it, but it's because you can't see how much they're smiling.
Yeah, and you don't have that same electricity that's in the room. We've got a question from Caroline Hopkins. She says, do you have a warm-up routine to get into the right mental state to be funny? No, I don't. It's not really about getting into the mental state to be funny, but I do sing. You sing?
Yeah. So I have I'm in rock choir, and I have all the songs that I sing. So I'll often sing Hallelujah, or I'll sing All of Me, John Legend, or I'll Be There, or sometimes the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night. And I'll just sing that really loudly.
I was thinking, you had me there for a moment. Of course, you don't sing those songs, do you?
I do.
You do?
Yeah, but not before I go on. Yeah.
Oh, before you go on, yeah.
Yeah, that's what a warm up is, isn't it? You know, it's not part of the show. I can sing one for you now, but I'm a funny man, but I'm not a great singer. Let me
well, I'll tell you what. If we go slightly over time, we'll let you do that at the end, and those that want to stay can stay to hear you sing.
Well, that's a bonus. That is something to look forward to.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Other things you can do for the virtual presentation. So I do this news bulletin style thing, and I would encourage people to think about doing sit down type stuff. So forget stand-up comedy, do sit down. And then, like you've already done the poll with us, I sometimes do humorous bits in the poll. And you did that with one of your choices, was quite humorous, wasn't it? So that works quite well. Or then have props. So for example, I've got a banana here. I don't really know what I would do with that. I know So one of my publicity shots for one of my shows is just me using a banana like a microphone, and you've got your pig there. So it's always good to have a few props just to put in to get a bit of a laugh. Yeah.
So people that are regulars know that Priscilla's always on the meetings, and if she isn't allowed to join, she squeals and oinks loudly until I invite her. So talking about standing, Sarah Fox says, even if standing, surely we want to see full faces, not full lengths.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if you stand, that is one of my main problems with standing. She's absolutely right. Is that you can't see the face in any detail. So unless you're someone that's got two cameras and you're toggling between them, I see lots of speakers buying loads of kit and mixing boards and multi cameras, and then they're delivering the same old boring stuff they've always done. So it's much better to be delivering interesting stuff, just straightforward. I don't think we need all this expensive kit.
Isn't it still 85 to 90% about the message rather than all the bits and pieces of paraphernalia that just put you under pressure?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Because I see speakers that are basically trying to become television presenters. And I think that the whole charm of a speaker is, I don't even like to use the word speaking. I like talking. And from all my radio training is that you talk to one person, and I see too many people speeching it out. And when they do this standing up on Zoom type stuff, they're thinking, oh, there's 100 people on this call, so I better project to 100 people. And everyone at home who is just one person out of 100 is all, crikey, you're a bit too big. So it's a bit like being a Shakespearean actor or someone in a soap on TV like EastEnders or is it Sivan Alan or something? I always call it 7-Eleven, Afrikaans. Sivan Delan, yeah. I know my wife watches it and I don't quite know what it's about. But if you could imagine a Shakespearean actor coming on and booming like that, would be brilliant at the Royal Shakespeare Company at Stratford-on-Avon because it projects right to the back. But to do that on a TV screen is way too big. And I think I see a lot of speakers on virtual stuff being way too big.
Yeah. So if you're going to be trying, for instance, Richard III, instead of doing it in a booming voice, you'd put more feeling in your voice and you'd go, now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by the son of York. And all the clouds that lowered upon our heads in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. So a bit more of that rather than the booming voice.
Yeah, absolutely. It was lovely to hear a bit of Richard III. I didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Didn't know you had a Shakespearean bent.
I've got one here from Andrew Butters. He says, it's a lovely question. He says, how do you own your own humor? In other words, make it unique by not using the same old well-known jokes and things to be funny about.
Yeah, so I think don't do jokes. That's one of my big things. Is because if you do a joke, there's a few things that can go wrong. First of all, someone might have heard it before. They might know it belongs to someone else. They might not find it funny. Chances are, if it's old, it might be a bit out of date and doesn't sit very well in today's climate. So much better to do what I would call funny lines, which are you do a serious line and then just an afterthought, a witty comment that comes after it. But as soon as you do, every year at the Edinburgh Festival, they publish the list of the 25 funniest jokes as voted by audience members. And I see speakers write all those down and start using them in their routines. Well, don't do that. Yeah, always do your own stuff.
The other problem with that, I find, is that a joke written down is very different from a joke delivered, because a lot of the funniness is actually in the delivery and the timing. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there is a lot to be said. There's two things. One is to write the funny lines, and one is to deliver it well. And so with the delivery, first of all, make sure that you are a wit, not a clown. And what I mean by that is you keep high status, because as a speaker, you want to have high status so that when you deliver your business message or you want people to change their behavior or buy something from you, they won't do that if you've come across as a clown. So make sure they're laughing with you and not at you. So in the delivery, that would mean don't do a funny line and then, try and tell funny, but not act funny. So, for example, Jimmy Carr, very famous British comedian, when he first started, he was a cheeky chappy and he would laugh a lot and he didn't do especially well. And then one night he was just fed up. He'd had a bad day and he delivered it all completely deadpan, like he didn't care. And he went down much better. And then he developed that as his persona.
Okay.
Sorry, I said Jimmy Carr. I didn't mean Jimmy Carr. I meant Jack D. I'm sorry.
Okay. So talking about what you have now, it lends itself to the next question. Won't people think I'm not serious about my business message if I can make jokes?
Yeah. Okay. So don't make jokes. That is the big thing. Do not make jokes. Just do witty, wry comments.
Yeah.
And that whole thing is about, you have to make sure that you keep your status, because whoever's asked that question is absolutely right. If you come across as too silly, then people, you will have lost your message. So keep your status so that people are laughing with you and they're not laughing at you, and just keep looking at yourself and thinking, have I metaphorically put on a big red nose? Look down at your feet and think, are you wearing great big shoes? Have the doors started to fall off your car? So what I'm saying is, have you become a clown? And if you have, then forget it.
Okay. Well, that was quite funny. Okay, so we've got a question here from Arent. What are the dangers of using humor where there are cultural limitations? And what advice do you have on using humor in multicultural audiences?
Yes, so that is tricky, because, so for example, I've spoken a lot in Dubai and Kuwait, and you have to be very careful about anything that would be seen as insulting to their culture. So you've just got to check everything. I run little filters in my head. Is what I'm saying racist? And I think, no, it's not, because I'm not a racist person. I don't ever have racist thoughts, so I'm fine with that one. But then I think, but could someone perceive it as racist because they might take it in a different way to what I'm meaning? I think, oh yeah, they might do actually. So what I'll do is I'll just tweak that. So is it racist? Is it sexist? Now, I grew up with 3 sisters. I'm not remotely sexist, but I go to football all the time. I hear a lot of sexist stuff. Has any of that affected me? I don't think so. And I'm running these filters. Is that, I think that's all right. And is it homophobic? Is it anything that's going to be cruel? And all these things you're going to be running in your head. And the difference, the problem with, if you're ad-libbing stuff, you've got to be running those filters live with pre-prepared material. You can go through it and go, no, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. Yeah, I'd say that one in the UK, but I might not say it in Dubai. I would say that in Australia, but I probably wouldn't say that in India. And you just think what things people get offended by in different cultures, and what things can't you talk about. So, for example, I do one story about someone getting roaring drunk, ridiculously drunk. It goes down very well in South Africa because you like a bit of that. In Dubai, where there's restrictions on drinking, I wouldn't dream of doing that particular story. So when I used to read the news on the BBC World Service, I would always have my script like this, and someone else would have written the script, because I'm live on air for 3 hours doing this live program. And I would read about 4 words ahead with my brain to what's coming out of my mouth, so that I know when to go up and when to go down. So if it was a football score, for example, Manchester United 1, West Ham United 2, because I need to know that the 2's coming to know whether to go up or down, whether it's Manchester United 1, West Ham 0.
But that's an unusual score anyway, isn't it?
I can't remember the last time we beat Manchester United, but you always need to be going ahead. Now, the thing is, if you're doing filters on stuff being suitable, you've got to make sure that your brain is about 4 words ahead of your mouth, so that it could, if it comes to something, goes, no, don't say that, Jeremy, don't say that, Jeremy. You don't find that your mouth's already said it. So that's the tricky thing. Run filters, and it's not whether or not what you meant to say was racist, sexist, homophobic. It's whether what people perceived it to be was a problem. So if I could give you, and this one is a Jimmy Carr example. The other one was Jack D. Jimmy Carr, do you know Jimmy Carr? He's a British comedian, but he can sometimes go a little bit too far. And he was doing some work with recovering servicemen that had been injured in the Gulf War and Afghanistan. British soldiers, and they'd lost limbs, and he was spending some time with them, and they were laughing and joking, and then he did a concert for them in the evening. And in that concert he did a line that, say what you like about the war in Afghanistan, we're going to have a cracking team for the Paralympics. And they all laughed because they had been laughing with him all day. They knew he'd given his time for free, and they thought, good old Jimmy. And he knew that they would find that funny, because the only way they coped with losing limbs was to make jokes like that. The next night, he did the same joke at a theatre in Manchester to a paying audience. He did that line and he got booed, because the people in the audience thought he was having a go at the soldiers. Whereas the soldiers the previous day knew he wasn't, but so it's that the perception, it's exactly the same line, but it's how the audience perceive it. So you just got to be really careful with that stuff.
Who makes you laugh?
Who makes me laugh? Right. So my all-time favorite comedian is Stuart Lee. And he's not a particularly famous one, but he just does not care. He just says what he thinks. And when the audience don't like it, and he deliberately doesn't do proper punchlines, and he does rambling stories. And when the audience don't like it that much, he has a go at them for not liking. And I just love that subversive nature. So go to YouTube if you want a real treat. And the thing is, 20% of the people watching this will absolutely love it. And the other 80% will go, I don't know why Jeremy Nicholas has recommended that, because I really didn't like it. He does a routine about Top Gear, the original Top Gear presenters with Jeremy Clarkson and the other two, Hammond and May. And he does this whole routine about, he doesn't know which one on Top Gear he hates the most, because he said you'd think it would be Jeremy Clarkson, but it's actually the hamster Hammond. He always calls him the hamster Hammond. So that's very good. And then he does another thing about a coffee loyalty card, where going around the country as a comedian, people, he would go to Cafe Nero and you get a little stamp. And after you've got 9 stamps in your little card, you get a free coffee. And because 2 of the stamps were a different color, they were red instead of blue, they wouldn't give him a free coffee. And it obviously annoyed him so much, he'd written a whole routine about it, and he'd made a big mock-up of the Cafe Nero card that he held up. And it's, I think he's my all-time comedy hero.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so I like Jimmy Carr and Jack D, who I've already mentioned, because I just love their style. I loved Victoria Wood for her Northern English rambling stories and her musical comedy. Laurel and Hardy for the visuals.
Oh yeah.
Morecambe and Wise, Eric Morecambe. Even my glasses are a bit like him. The Two Ronnies, I was very keen on those. So I like storytellers. Curiously, not Billy Connolly. People always say, "Oh, you must like Billy Connolly." I don't, because he laughs all the time. He laughs all the time as he's going on, and some of his stories are good, but they're not as good as he thinks they are. So, yeah.
Okay, and then some quick tips on how I can make my talks funnier. What are your main tips?
Yeah, so stories, not jokes, is the big way. If people watching this take one thing away, jokes, no, scribble it out, stories. And then find links between things. So if you've got a really good talk, what would really make it nice, it's like having a great cake and then the humor is just the icing. You'll just ice it to make it look nice and taste nice. Find things that you think there's no link between them. Let me just see if I've got some CDs here. I can do your visual thing. Anything in that one? Yeah, okay. So if that's one subject, just plucking things off my desk here, and that's another one. You know, Venn diagrams is where there's like the intersection on a Venn diagram between two things. So I was working with someone the other day, and they were doing a talk about art crime, how forgeries in the art world. So I was trying to find things that would link art with crime. So just off the top of your head, just think what links art and crime. Think of funny stuff. Now, I won't put you on. I took about half an hour over this, and I came up with 2 things that I was pleased with. One is that the problem with art crime is sometimes you get framed because you frame someone in a crime, and so that's a funny thing. And then the other one was art criminals, should they bring back hanging? Because you hang a painting in the same way as you hang a criminal. And it's just, if you can just find those little things, what's the difference? What's the connection between those things? In the same way as if I was a Brit speaking in South Africa, I would think, what's different about the way we do something to the way you do something?
Yeah.
So instantly, if it was about supermarkets, I can't say Tesco, Sainsbury's, but I would go Pick and Pay. So I would always put it into the language so that people think, oh, he's put a bit of effort into that. But also, for example, when I first, so my wife is South African, and when I first met the extended family, all her sisters were called Tanny Herma, Tanny Velma, Tanny something, and yet her name was just Velma. And I just thought, how come your mum doesn't have such a double-barreled name as everyone else? And my wife said, well, Tanny just means auntie. And I just thought they all had exotic names, and she just had a very singular one. Or, for example, the first time I asked for directions in Johannesburg, someone said, I'm going to have to do the South African voice, I apologize. Now you go along there until you come to the robot, and then you turn right at the robot. And I thought, if there's a robot that way, I'm not going, because to me, a robot is something that in science fiction films I've been scared of all my life. But it's just what we would call a traffic light.
Yeah. But Jeremy, that's the best South African accent I've ever heard you do.
Is it?
Yeah, it's the best one of all time. In fact, talking about Tannie, I'm the member of a running club, and I'm one of the older members. And in Afrikaans, just like you call an auntie Tannie, you call an older person, an older man, you'd call him oom. That's the term in Afrikaans. But we had an Afrikaans guy that was referring to us older runners. So he just changed it into English for us. So we are now known as the uncles.
Excellent.
which is actually quite hilarious.
Yeah.
So,
I remember going shopping in Harrods with my wife when she first came to London, and she's a runner, and she went to get into the Nike shop in the top floor of Harrods in the sports department, and there was a young South African guy who was serving, and he was obviously so pleased to be able to chat to somebody in Afrikaans, but he made the big mistake of calling her Tannie, and she was about 41.
Yeah.
And let's just say she did not buy any trainers because she said, I can't believe he's called me Tannie. I'm 41. Why would he say that?
Absolutely. So last question, then I'm going to let you go. What should I avoid?
What should you avoid? Well, I keep saying it, but jokes. And avoid trying too hard and looking too pleased with yourself. There's nothing an audience hates more than you come along and you go, oh, did you see that thing in the paper? Da, 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 da. Like that. And it's instantly, it's like, oh, just deliver it like you don't care.
Even deadpan in itself.
Deadpan, absolutely. Yeah, deadpan is funny. So anyone making notes, write down in big letters, tell funny, don't try and be funny. Yeah. And the other thing is pause. Get to the funny bit. So punchlines like this, where you get to the funny bit and you hit that, just pause, stop, and wait for them to laugh. Sometimes you might need to wait 20 minutes, but just wait and eventually they will laugh.
Yeah, you could always stand there and go like this, and perhaps they will laugh. Yeah.
But that's where most speakers go wrong. I see a lot of speakers that are naturally funny, but then they come to the funny bit and they carry on and the audience are laughing. Why would you do that? If the audience are laughing, just wait, let them.
Yeah,
well, so what I'll often do is
you've worked so hard for your laugh, you may as well enjoy it.
Yeah. Have a sip of water. Fiddle around with the clicker, do something.
Yeah, and I think, Jeremy, just to really end off on, one of the ways to really engage the audience, apart from using games and things, is just to keep it lighthearted. Because when you keep it lighthearted, people are enjoying themselves, they'll be engaged with you, they'll tend to stay longer.